She negotiated billion-dollar deals in 5 languages, but stood helpless watching her mute daughter drift away in silence. Callista Morgan had 8 years to learn sign language. She failed. Then one Saturday morning, a widowed father spent 5 minutes doing what she never could, making her daughter laugh. What he revealed next destroyed everything Callista believed about protecting her child. The autumn morning painted San Francisco in shades of gold and amber, casting long shadows across the gleaming towers of the financial district. Callista Morgan stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, watching the city wake beneath her. At 40 years old, she commanded one of the most successful real estate empires on the West Coast. Her name whispered with asterisk equal parts admiration and intimidation in boardrooms across the city. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman of striking beauty with sharp cheekbones and platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe bun that had become her signature. But behind those ice-blue eyes lay a weariness that no amount of success could erase. 8 years. It had been 8 years since she'd become a single mother. 8 years since that phone call had shattered her world into pieces. She was still trying to reassemble. The memory of that night remained vivid. The police officer's voice on the phone, the sterile hospital corridor, the moment she had to return home and face her 2-year-old daughter alone. Astrid had been too young to understand why Daddy never came home, but old enough to feel the absence that would shape both their lives. Astrid Morgan was 12 now, a delicate preteen with her father's warm eyes that sparkled like sapphires when she smiled, which wasn't often enough these days. Born with a rare neurological condition that had stolen her voice before she could properly use it, Astrid navigated the world in silence. The doctors had been optimistic at first, suggesting various treatments and therapies. But as years passed, it became clear that Astrid's voice would remain locked inside her. Callista had thrown herself into learning sign language with the same intensity she brought to hostile takeovers and million-dollar deals. But the fluid grace of native signers eluded her. Their conversations often dissolved into frustrated gestures and guessed meanings, leaving both mother and daughter feeling more isolated than connected. The intercom buzzed, pulling Callista from her thoughts. Gwen Harper's voice filled the office, warm and familiar after 5 years of working together. Gwen was more than an executive assistant. She was the closest thing Callista had to a friend. Though even that relationship was carefully managed, kept at arm's length like everything else in Callista's life. "Your 9 o'clock is here," Gwen announced, asterisk though. Her tone suggested she knew Callista's mind was elsewhere. Also, Yamamoto-san from Tokyo called. He's asterisk concerned about the leadership transition rumors. You know how personal this is for him. His grandson uses JSL, Japanese Sign Language. And don't forget, you promised Astrid you'd take her to that new cafe on Valencia Street this morning. Callista's stomach dropped. The Japanese investor represented 40% of their expansion capital, and his commitment to inclusive design ran deeper than profit margins, and she had forgotten about breakfast with Astrid. Again, the guilt that had become her constant companion tightened its grip. "Tell Yamamoto-san I'll call him at noon Tokyo time," she said, her decision swift. "And cancel the 9 o'clock? Actually, cancel everything until noon? I'm taking my daughter to breakfast?" "The board won't like that," Gwen warned gently. "Marcus Henderson has been making noise about your divided attention lately." "Let him," Callista replied, though she knew the cost could be steep. 30 minutes later, Callista stood outside Astrid's bedroom door in their Pacific Heights mansion. A house too large for 2 people who barely spoke. She knocked gently, then entered, to find her daughter already dressed, sitting by the window with her sketchpad. Astrid looked up, surprise flickering across her features when she saw her mother in casual clothes rather than the usual Powers suit. "Ready for our breakfast date?" Callista signed, her movements careful and deliberate. Astrid's face transformed, a smile breaking through like sunshine after rain. She nodded asterisk enthusiastically. Grabbing her favorite purple backpack decorated with painted butterflies she'd added herself. The cafe on Valencia Street was everything their house wasn't. Warm, crowded, alive with the chatter of weekend families. And the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee. Maple leaves pressed against the windows, their orange and red hues creating a natural stained glass effect. Callista guided Astrid to a corner table by the window, watching as her daughter immediately pulled out her sketch pad and began drawing the leaves dancing in the morning breeze. While Callista stood at the counter ordering, she kept glancing back at Astrid, noting how small and alone she looked at the table for four. Other children her age were chattering with their parents, sharing jokes and stories. While Astrid remained in her bubble of silence, the familiar ache returned, the one that reminded Callista of all the ways she was failing as a mother. The bell above the door chimed, and a man entered with a young boy. The child, perhaps 6 or 7, had sandy brown hair that stuck up at odd angles, despite what appeared to be recent attempts to tame it. He wore a dinosaur sweater and carried a well-loved stuffed triceratops. His father followed, tall and lean with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, dressed in worn jeans and a flannel shirt that spoke of weekend comfort rather than corporate ambition. Before anyone could react, the boy had bounced over to Astrid's table, his attention caught by her drawing. Callista tensed, ready to intervene, her protective instincts flaring. But then something extraordinary happened. The man approached calmly, and instead of speaking, his hands began to move in fluid, graceful motions. He was signing to Astrid, asking if his son Oliver could see her beautiful artwork. Astrid's transformation was instantaneous and breathtaking. Her entire body seemed to light up from within, her hands flying in response. No longer the hesitant, uncertain movements she used with her mother, but confident, expressive, alive. She was telling him about the leaves, about how each one was different, like snowflakes or fingerprints. The man listened intently, nodding, responding with equal enthusiasm, his facial expressions and eyebrows adding grammatical nuance that Callista had never mastered. "I'm Elias Bennett," the man said when she returned to the table, his voice gentle with a slight southern drawl. "This is Oliver. I hope you don't mind him joining Astrid." He saw her drawing and, well, he's never been good at staying put when art is involved. "How do you?" Callista began gesturing vaguely at the sign language. "My mother was a teacher at the California School for the Deaf for 30 years, Elias explained, his hands unconsciously moving as he spoke. "I grew up signing before I could properly talk. It's like a first language for me. Actually, it was my first language. Mom always said hearing people learn to listen with their ears, but deaf culture teaches you to listen with your whole being." Oliver had pulled out his own crayons and was adding touches to Astrid's drawing with her enthusiastic permission. They were creating a story together? Astrid signing the narrative, while Oliver added visual elements using classifiers to show how big the squirrels were, how the trees swayed. "She's incredibly expressive," Elias continued, watching the children. "Her vocabulary is advanced for her age. And look at her facial grammar. The way she raises her eyebrows for questions, furrows them for emphasis. She's not just signing. She's truly speaking ASL." The compliment stung because Callista knew it wasn't deserved. She watched Astrid's animated conversation with Elias. The way her daughter's shoulders relaxed, how her usually guarded expression opened like a flower in spring, stayed with Callista. "I'm still learning," Callista admitted. "It is harder than I expected. Sometimes I feel like I am failing her." Elias turned to her, his brown eyes warm with understanding. "Every parent feels that way. Trust me, I know. Oliver's mom passed when he was 3. There are days I have no idea what I am doing. But showing up, trying, that matters more than being perfect." He mentioned a family class on Saturday mornings, parents and children learning together. Astrid might enjoy practicing with other kids, and you could improve your fluency in a supportive environment. Before Callista could respond, her phone buzzed. 3 missed calls from the office, 2 from board members, and a text from Gwen that read, "Tech blogs picked up photos of you at Café. Henderson calling emergency meeting. Yamamoto-san wants answers now." The real world crashed in, threatening everything she had built, but looking at Astrid's joy, something shifted. "I should go," she said, already standing. "Thank you for talking with her." Elias stood and handed her a simple business card. "The class information is on there. No pressure. Astrid would be welcome any time. You both would be. The week that followed was a battlefield. Tech blogs ran headlines. Distracted CEO, is Morgan Enterprises losing focus? Marcus Henderson leaked concerns to investors. Yamamoto-san's team demanded reassurances. Even as she fought to save her company, Callista's mind returned to the café, to Astrid's joy, to Elias's patient hands. Thursday afternoon, Gwen placed fresh coffee and a tablet on Callista's desk. They're calling you the absent CEO. Marcus has convinced 3 board members to demand a performance review. Callista looked down, surprised to find Elias's card in her hand, edges worn from handling. He teaches sign language, she said. He talked to Astrid like it was natural. She was so happy, Gwen, so take her to the class, Gwen replied. The Yamamoto deal will wait. Your daughter's childhood will not? I have watched you build walls for 5 years. Maybe it is time to build bridges. That evening, Callista found Astrid at the kitchen table with homework. Astrid looked up, then back down. The hope faded. Astrid, Callista signed, sitting beside her. Would you like to go to a sign language class on Saturday with other children? The transformation was instant. Astrid's hands flew with excitement. Could Oliver be there? Could they go every week? Saturday arrived gray and misty. San Francisco sat under rolling fog. The community center in the Mission District glowed with murals of signing hands. Callista felt out of place in designer jeans until she saw Elias setting up visual aids. Oliver tangled himself in a banner that read, "Every voice matters, even silent ones." Elias looked up and smiled, bright and warm. The class was a revelation. 15 families learning together. Elias taught vocabulary and culture. ASL is not English on the hands, he explained. It is a spatial language. Facial expression provides grammar. During break, Astrid stood and tapped the table for attention. The room quieted. She organized a signing game, silent story circle. She explained the rules with clarity. Use classifiers. Use facial grammar. Maintain spatial consistency. A younger boy struggled. Astrid knelt beside him and showed him patiently how hands became cars, people, birds. When he succeeded, pride lit his face and Astrid's smile shone. Callista watched her daughter become a confident leader, guiding children and parents alike. Astrid corrected gently, encouraged openly, belonged fully. Elias appeared beside Callista with coffee. She is a natural teacher, he said. She adjusts her speed. She builds confidence and community. Callista swallowed. I have been holding her back. The admission painful but necessary, like setting a broken bone. I've been so afraid of failing her, so terrified of her being hurt that I've kept her in a bubble. Our bubble, really. Just the 2 of us in that big house, protecting each other from a world that might not understand. Fear makes us do that, Elias replied, his voice carrying the weight of his own experience. After Oliver's mom died, I barely left the house for 6 months. I was terrified that if I let him out of my sight, something would happen to him too. I thought I was keeping him safe, but I was keeping him from living. Kids need more than our protection. They need community, challenge, the chance to discover who they are beyond our fears. Astrid's game had evolved now with 12 children participating, creating an elaborate story about a deaf superhero who saved the world through visual communication. The children were laughing, their hands flying, their faces animated with expression that transcended the need for sound. Parents watched with tears in their eyes, seeing their children not as limited by deafness, but empowered by a different way of being in the world. After class, the 4 of them went to lunch at a small taqueria. The children sat together, Astrid teaching Oliver new signs while they shared chips and salsa. This is nice, Elias said simply, and Callista knew he meant more than just lunch. It is, she agreed, allowing herself to relax for the first time in longer than she could remember. As the children drew on their placemats, Elias watched them with an expression Callista couldn't quite read. After Beth died, he said quietly, not looking at her, I promised myself Oliver would be enough. That I wouldn't need anyone else. Wouldn't risk, he trailed off, his hands unconsciously forming the sign for fear. But watching him with Astrid, seeing how happy he is to have a friend who just accepts him completely. I realize I've been keeping him in a bubble, too. My grief bubble. He finally looked at Callista, vulnerability clear in his eyes. I'm terrified of letting people in again, but maybe being terrified is better than being alone. That weekend, her phone exploded with messages. A photographer had captured them at lunch, and tech blogs were running wild with speculation. CAO's new priority, romance over revenue. Marcus Henderson called an emergency board meeting for Monday. Sunday evening, Callista sat in her home office preparing for battle. Gwen arrived with files and strategies, but also with advice. You could fight this the old way, Gwen said, or you could try something different. Show them that opening up doesn't make you weak. It makes you stronger. Monday's board meeting was tense enough to cut with a knife. The boardroom on the 40th floor had never felt more like an arena. With its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city Callista had helped build. Marcus led the charge about lack of focus and questionable priorities. His PowerPoint slides showing paparazzi photos from the Café, from the Tacaria, from the art show. The room full of men in identical charcoal suits stared at her with disapproval, their faces masks of corporate concern hiding personal ambitions. This is about optics, Marcus said, clicking to a slide showing stock projections. Our investors need stability, not a CEO having a midlife crisis. Is that what you think this is? Callista asked calmly, though inside she felt a fire building, not of anger, but of clarity. What else would you call it? You're abandoning million-dollar dinners for finger-painting exhibitions, the room murmured agreement. These men, who had never once asked about Astrid in 8 years, who scheduled board meetings during school plays and parent-teacher conferences without a second thought. Callista listened to each complaint, each thinly veiled threat, then stood. But instead of her usual PowerPoint, instead of graphs and charts and projections, she began to sign as she spoke, her hands moving fluidly, painting pictures in the air. Gentlemen, let me show you something. She pulled up their latest market research on the main screen. 40 million Americans use ASL. That's 40 million potential customers we've been ignoring because we couldn't speak their language. Another 20 million are family members, friends, colleagues who interact with the deaf community daily. She moved around the room as she spoke, using the spatial referencing Elias had taught her, literally placing different market segments in different areas of the room, making the invisible visible while you've been worried about optics. I've been seeing opportunities you've been blind to. She pulled up her tablet wirelessly, displaying her screen. This weekend, while you think I was distracted, I was actually conducting market research. Do you know what percentage of commercial buildings in San Francisco are genuinely accessible to the deaf community? 3%. 3. She showed them her plans. Properties with visual fire alarms as standard. Videophone systems in every unit. Common areas designed with sightlines that allowed for sign language conversations across rooms. She showed them the partnership proposals from deaf-owned businesses, the endorsements from disability rights organizations, the premium rates such properties could command. I'm not distracted. I'm seeing our business through new eyes. I'm finding blue oceans in red markets. She looked directly at Marcus, her gaze steady. You say I'm unfocused because I'm learning to communicate with my daughter. I say that learning has taught me to see our entire industry differently. If you can't see the value in that, perhaps you're the one who's lost focus. She pulled up one final slide, a photo Gwen had taken at the ASL class. Callista and Astrid signing together, both laughing, surrounded by other families. This isn't a distraction from my work. This is the reason for it. And if you can't understand that, if you can't see that, a CEO who understands multiple ways of communicating, multiple ways of seeing the world is an asset, not a liability, then perhaps you're not the board this company needs for its next chapter. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Yamamoto-san's face appeared on the conference screen from Tokyo. She'd forgotten he was dialed in, watching everything. Morgan's son, he said, his voice carrying the weight of billions in investment power. In Japan we have a saying, the bamboo that bends is stronger than the oak that resists. You have shown you can bend without breaking. This is leadership. He paused, his next words careful but clear. Yamamoto Industries will increase our investment by 20%, contingent on your inclusive development initiative moving forward. And Henderson's son. He looked directly at Marcus through the camera. Perhaps it is time for you to learn a new language as well. That evening, she found Astrid in her room video calling Oliver, teaching his stuffed triceratops sign language. Mom Astrid signed when she noticed her. Elias invited us camping next month. Real camping with tents and stars. Can we go? Yes, Callista signed back. We can. Wednesday brought an unexpected text from Elias. Oliver's school is having an art show Friday. He wanted to invite Astrid. No pressure, but you're both welcome. Callista had a crucial client dinner Friday. A deal worth millions. The old her wouldn't have hesitated. She canceled the dinner, sending her CFO instead. Friday evening at Oliver's school was beautiful chaos. Oliver dragged them to his painting. 2 houses with a rainbow bridge connecting them. It's our houses? He signed to Astrid. So we can visit whenever we want. I haven't done this in a long time. Callista admitted to Elias as they watched their children. Been close to someone? Let someone in. Neither am I, Elias replied. But maybe we could figure it out together. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that transformed their lives. Saturday, classes became sacred time, untouchable, even when the Tokyo team demanded weekend calls. Callista's signing improved dramatically, but more importantly, her connection with Astrid deepened into something profound. They developed inside jokes in ASL, visual puns that made them both giggle. Astrid taught her mother how facial expressions changed meaning entirely. How the height of your hands could indicate age or status. How the speed of signing conveyed emotion as clearly as tone of voice. Callista began incorporating visual communication into her leadership style. Using gestures and spatial organization in presentations during a crucial merger negotiation, she unconsciously started using the spatial referencing she'd learned in ASL, placing different companies in different spaces around her as she spoke, referring back to them with simple gestures. Her team, initially skeptical, found it made complex multi-party deals. Suddenly crystal clear. You're different. Her CFO commented after she'd closed a $10 million deal using what she'd started calling visual architecture in her presentations. More dimensional. The camping trip to UC became a turning point that none of them saw coming. 4 days completely disconnected from the corporate world. No cell service, no emails, just the 4 of them and the wilderness. Callista learned to set up a tent badly at first, the poles defeating her repeatedly, while Astrid and Oliver giggled from their perfectly assembled shelter. Elias taught them all wilderness survival basics. His patience endless even when Callista somehow managed to burn water while attempting to cook over the campfire. How is that even possible? Oliver signed, staring at the blackened pot in amazement. Your mom has special talents. Elias laughed, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. On the 3rd night, after the children were asleep in their tent, their soft breathing mixing with cricket songs, Callista and Elias sat by the dying fire. The Milky Way sprawled above them in a way you never saw in the city. Each star a possibility, a choice, a moment of light in the darkness. My husband loved camping, Callista said suddenly, surprising herself with the admission. She rarely talked about him. Had locked those memories away with everything else that hurt too much to examine. He wanted to take Astrid when she was older. Teach her to love the outdoors. He had this whole plan every national park by the time she was 18. After he died, I couldn't do any of the things we'd planned. It hurt too much. Elias took her hand, his touch warm and steady against the cool mountain air. But you're doing them now with you, she said, the words carrying more weight than their simplicity suggested. With me, he agreed. And under the vast wilderness sky, with the ancient trees as witnesses, he kissed her. It was gentle, patient, a promise rather than a demand, a beginning rather than a rush. When they returned, something fundamental had shifted. The children were delighted. Oliver calling Astrid his almost sister. Astrid drawing pictures of them as a family. Callista began implementing her inclusive vision at work. She hired deaf architects, created visual meeting protocols, and landed the biggest development deal in company history with a deaf-owned business consortium. The very qualities Marcus had criticized became her greatest strengths. 3 months later, at the Sign Language Center celebration, Callista addressed the gathered families, her signing now fluid and confident. 8 months ago, I walked in here lost, she signed. I thought I was just bringing my daughter to learn, but I found community. I found my voice in silence. I found my daughter again. Not the quiet shadow I'd been protecting, but the brilliant light she truly is. And I found love. Spring brought challenges when Oliver got sick. Landing in the hospital for a week, Callista took time off, really off, supporting Elias through his terror. When Oliver recovered, Elias pulled Callista close. "Move in with us," he said suddenly. "Oh, we'll move in with you. You and Astrid aren't just part of our lives anymore. You are our life." The move was chaotic and perfect. The big house that had echoed with loneliness now rang with laughter, with family dinners where everyone signed, including everyone always. 6 months later, on a brilliant Saturday morning at the Sign Language Center, Elias got down on one knee. He signed his proposal while Oliver and Astrid held a banner reading, "Say Yes." Callista's yes was signed and spoken and laughed and cried all at once while the room erupted in visual applause, hands waving like leaves in a joyful wind. They married the following spring in the botanical garden, surrounded by cherry blossoms and their ASL family. Astrid and Oliver stood as witnesses while she signed a poem about families being gardens, growing stronger when planted together. 5 years passed in a blur of ordinary miracles. Astrid grew confident, becoming an advocate for deaf children. Oliver's art focused on visualizing the unspoken. Callista's company became a model for inclusive business practices, with her TED Talk on leading with all languages going viral. Elias's design firm specialized in universal communication. At Astrid's high school graduation, she stood as valedictorian. She delivered her speech in ASL and through an interpreter, speaking about communication beyond words, about families built from choice and commitment. "The woman who taught me to find my voice never made a sound," Astrid signed, looking at her mother. "She showed me that love needs no words, only the willingness to learn each other's languages." Oliver, now 16, signed his enthusiasm from the front row. Elias held Callista's hand tightly, both crying openly. "That's our daughter," he whispered. And Callista loved that there was no distinction, no qualifier. They were simply completely family. Marcus Henderson approached during the party. "Now a changed man?" "You were right," he said simply. "My grandson is deaf. I never understood until now. Bring him to the center." Callista said Saturday mornings. "We'll be there because they always were." It had become their tradition, their way of giving back. Elias taught. Callista assisted. Astrid mentored. Oliver created murals, celebrating visual language. A young couple approached with their deaf daughter. Before Callista could respond, Astrid was there kneeling down, showing the child that her hands could speak, could sing, could tell stories. "It's going to be okay," Callista told the parents. "Better than okay. Your daughter will show you a whole new world."